Hey my loves, welcome back, or if we haven't met, hi, I'm Ty. Today we're looking at the Judgment card in the tarot. This is a card that a lot of people have some difficulty with, myself included. If we look at the Smith-Waite version, which is probably the most common one that we see around, we can see that it does depict biblical themes and stories. And for a lot of us in the tarot community, especially my fellow queer tarot readers, a lot of us have traumas surrounding Christianity. Many of us have even deliberately distanced ourselves from Christian religions. So seeing overtly Christian imagery can feel anywhere from distressing to just not relevant for us personally. So for this video, I want to talk a bit about my interpretation of the Judgment card, as well as some myths and figures from mythology that fit really nicely with it, of course. And this is another VR to the tag Top Tarot Trumps, started by Marsha of Musings by Marsha. So I will be showing 5 of my favourite Judgment cards from different decks. And a quick note, I'll be joining a live discussion about this series over on Marsha's channel in a couple of days. A bunch of TarotTube creators will be talking about some of our favourite cards and what we've learned about the major arcana through doing this series. I'll put the details in the description, so if you see this in time, tune in, or head there afterwards, because the replay will also be available to watch. But for now, let's get started on my favourite Judgment cards. Our first card is from the Ethereal Visions Lunar Edition, and out of the 5 cards that I've chosen, this one's probably the closest in imagery to the Smith-Waite card. We can see here we have the people rising from their graves, and I've chosen this card purely on aesthetics, which is why we're starting here. So I think the face in the sky, which replaces the angel on this card, I'm not sure if this face is intended to be an angel or if it's God or the higher self, but regardless, I really like the way that it's drawn, like just in a visual way. And personally, I find it a bit easier to impart the idea of divinity onto a face like this rather than necessarily like that classical angel. I like the colors in this card, and I think it goes really well with the little foil detail that's all used in this deck, and it just comes together really nicely. The guidebook for this deck is very brief, which is another reason I wanted to start here, because this card just has 2 sentences, and it says, "The Judgment card shows up when it is time for self-evaluation. You are at a crux for reaching a new life and must purge those things that would hinder you from being renewed." And I really like that definition. When we think of this card, we might default to the mainstream Christian ideas of the afterlife, that there's one God who will judge us after we die and determine if we're going to heaven or hell. So I like that in this deck, they've made it a point to focus on self-evaluation instead, because that's really the lens that I prefer to see this card through. Rather than an external God judging us, it's our judgment of ourselves. And I think that's a judgment that's not reserved for after we die. I think it's a process that happens many times over our life as well as afterwards. And it's our judgment of ourselves that, I think, creates heaven or hell. Which brings us to our next card. This one's from the 8 Coins Tattoo Tarot, and this shows some fairly classic representations of heaven and hell, good and evil. And the reason that I've included this one next is because I want to talk about this theory that we make our own heaven and hell, and that we don't have to wait for death, we're living in them right now. So I'll try and explain a little bit what I mean by this. Bear with me for a bit. Picture a bad person. Like a person that does actual, legitimately evil things. There are belief systems that say that after this person dies, an external God will judge them and send them to hell for punishment. Personally, I don't think it takes that long. I think some people live in hell on this earth because whatever decisions we make, they have consequences, even if those consequences take some time to be visible. So my favorite example is a really, really rich person. And this has turned out to be kind of a timely example, I reckon. To acquire billions of dollars necessarily requires immoral actions. And no, I won't be taking questions on that. They acquired that much wealth by being selfish, greedy, and ruthless. So already they've made other people's lives hell as well. And because of that, what is their life? They have all they want materially, but who are they surrounded by? Almost exclusively people who want something from them. People who want money or to be promoted or social currency. They have no real friends, no one who really loves them, just employees and hangers-on. They get into legal battles with their relatives over inheritances and businesses or horrific divorces from their spouses. And worse, a lot of the time they become so obsessed with wealth that they live in constant stress of trying to protect it and create more. They get paranoid about security. The most wealthy people in the world can't even go anywhere in public without being followed and recognized. And recent events, other things. So is that not hellish? I don't think I could live that way. And the thing about this is, it takes years to get there, and it's also not permanent. I don't think anyone is irredeemable. Hell is not forever. Which, again, nice and timely, topical for this time of year. Remember A Christmas Carol, the Charles Dickens story? Or maybe better known to some of us, A Muppet Christmas Carol? When Scrooge sees how he's hurt so many people, and the effects of his greed and his selfishness, he's racked with guilt. And I think that moment actually perfectly illustrates the Judgment card, because that self-judgment, assessing our past actions, even if it doesn't have to take 3 ghosts, and their consequences, and taking responsibility and making the active decision to change, that's how you transcend hell. That's how you get out of that dark and horrible place. And that's kind of a large-scale example, I think, but this can also apply on a much smaller scale too, like admitting when we've been wrong in an argument, or when we've done something that we feel guilty about. If we ignore our wrongdoings and our flaws, or we suppress them, we can't ever make progress, and we trap ourselves in a kind of hell. Whether that's the hell of losing a friendship because of your pride, or the hell of being unforgiven, or the hell of feeling guilt and knowing that you haven't made amends. If we honestly face our past actions instead, despite the pain that can bring, it's also an opportunity to repair what we damaged and to be different in the future. And the idea of atonement and reparation is one that's in the guidebook for this deck, and one that I think is a bit underemphasized sometimes with this card. Taking responsibility for our past actions is something that can be really difficult or even painful, but it's the type of decision which puts us on that heaven path, whereas sweeping things under the rug or ignoring our own wrongdoings just allows them to fester, and their consequences just keep on accumulating and dragging us down to hell. So I really think self-evaluation and then course correction is how I read Judgment. And of course, I've talked enough about what hell could be. It's worth remembering there are also those who live in heaven every single day. Those are the people who sing or dance whenever the mood strikes, and who appreciate birds and flowers, and give their help to others whenever they can, and who show hospitality and friendship and kindness, and they make life better for everyone. And those are the people who are happy within themselves, and who draw people to them who they authentically connect with. A person could have the worst material conditions possible, but still be in heaven if they're surrounded by love and connection. And it's always our choice and the accumulation of our choices that determines our path to heaven or hell. And it's never too late to change course. Next we have the Mary L. Tarot, which shows the phoenix, which is of course the bird that emerges from fire. And I think it's fairly clear the analogy here between a bird that rises from ashes and the people in the traditional versions of this card rising from their graves. So it's a really good choice of subject. I also just love the art on this card. There's so much movement to it. The composition is really nice. The colors are really nice. The guidebook for this deck is pretty different than most in that it's really, really detailed and really eloquent. So I don't think I could possibly summarize what it says in there. But one part that really stood out to me for this card was that the author mentions Metatron, or Enoch, from the Bible, and equates him with Hermes and Thoth, or Thoth, from the Greek and Egyptian traditions. And if you know me, you know that synchronization is a real interest of mine, so I was very interested to read about that. And it's also, I think, pretty fitting given my final 2 cards. So our 4th card is from This Might Hurt, and the artist has chosen to show Anubis, an Egyptian god, who it's said that when a person dies, Anubis weighs their heart against the feather of truth, and it decides their fate, whether they ascend or descend, depending on whether their heart is lighter or heavier. The guidebook makes the point, again, that we're not dead yet. And so it says that the judge at the moment when we're doing our reading is not external. So it's encouraging self-evaluation. It asks the question, who have you been and who do you want to be? Which again, I think that's the interpretation of this card that I really prefer. Who have you been and who do you want to be? It's that we're our own judge. Hey, did we get through this whole video without talking about Greek myth? Absolutely not, my guy. Card 5 is from the Mythic Tarot, and of course we have Hermes. So this card shows Hermes in his capacity as psychopomp, so a figure who leads the souls of the dead to the afterlife. And we do see again similarities here with the more traditional versions of this card. I don't want to beat a dead horse at this point, but again, I like to think of this as a process that we do in life, sometimes over and over. so it doesn't have to wait for death for this judgment card to occur. The process of looking back at our past actions and decisions and determining who we'll be moving forward. So it's the point at which we understand the consequences of what we've done and when all of our knowledge and experience converges. I read a really good summary of this process that compared it to how an artist works. So all of the artist's influences and experiences and past works and practice converge when they're making a piece, whether it's a sculpture or a painting or what have you. And then once that piece is finished, it's put out into the world. That moment when that work is finished is like the judgment card. Hermes here is leading the dead to the afterlife, which in a way is leading them to a new life, a rebirth. So this is a moment of birth or rebirth, when all of those past influences converge into a new product. And just like I was saying earlier, it doesn't just happen once. Most artists don't make just one work. The next piece they work on is going to begin this whole process again, and each work will be another iteration of this same cycle. And I think that's a beautiful way to describe this card. It shows the product of all that's come before, so it's a culmination, but at the same time, it's also a new possibility for what's yet to come. So these are my 5 favorite judgment cards. I hope I've been able to articulate what I think of this card. I think the self-evaluation interpretation is certainly becoming more widespread nowadays. So let me know if that's your preferred interpretation as well. If you enjoyed this video, I would love a like. Feel free to subscribe if you're not already, and if you are, thanks. That's very cool of you. Take care.